Hey guys, welcome to another episode of On Air. Excited for this one. I've got Shaun Doherty, Doherty, however you want to say it. He says it's okay to say it however you like. From the 555 Club, joining us today. And we're going to be talking about how you can manage stress and pressure, particularly in the early stage of your career, leaning on some of the learnings from Shaun's early stage of his career that maybe he didn't do as well as he would if he had his time again. And hopefully we can pick some learnings out for you guys to think about how you manage the pressure that we carry when we're working in sales, revenue leadership, marketing leadership, and how we manage that pressure and get a positive outcome from it. We'll talk a bit more on that in a moment. Shaun, firstly, welcome to the show. How are things? Are you well?
Yes, I am actually very well. I managed a 20-minute sleep before this, so I'm feeling good.
Nice. What a prep work for that for the interview. Absolutely love it. So what we like to do with our guests up front before we get into things is let some people be watching this and listening to this and they'll know you. Many won't. So just give you a couple of minutes to tell us who's Shaun and what's the 555 Club all about.
Okay, so very briefly, Shaun, owner of the 555 Club. It initially started as a top of funnel for a different business and has since morphed into what it is today, which is live bite-sized wellness for companies, organizations, coaches, and individuals, where there's live calls run Monday through Friday based on breathwork, meditation, and gratitude journaling. And then staff members simply drop in, take what they need from the calls, and then either start their day, get back to their day, or close their day out, depending what time of day it is.
Okay. So really interesting concept, and I think most people would agree they've probably not heard of something like this in the past. Where keen to understand, like, where does that idea come from? Where was it born from? What were your experiences that led you to this?
I spent most of my 20s going through cancer, either in and out of hospital beds or ironically, the hardest part of the journey was after the all clear, when most people think you're good, and it was managing symptoms post-transplant, where I have a condition called graft versus host disease. So that's where my donor cells are battling my cells, and it can cause a whole host of things. So one of my signs is rashes. So through a podcast, found out that cold water could help the rashes, started cold water exposure, spent a lot of time in hospital through sinus infections, and started into breathwork through most people's gateway to breathwork at the minute would be Wim Hof. It was the same for me. Found that through the breathwork, I stopped getting sinus infections. That led me to get more curious around it. Started training in different breathworks and meditation and different practices along those lines. And I would say late 2019, I made a rough plan of how do I transition from where I was as a financial advisor to something in the wellness. I didn't know what it was in the wellness space. Many iterations, many mess ups, many falling on my faces. The idea for the 555 Club came about purely because it's short and it's simple, and I think that needs to be, and it's accessible. I know if someone approached me with anything north of 20 minutes 5 years ago, I'd have laughed them in the face. So it started off once a day, turned into in-person work, and then turned into a 3-time-a-week job, and then for congruency, and I just felt for me to serve the people who are paying for it best, it had to go to 5 times a week. So it's 5 times a day, 5 times a week, and that's the very, very. I could spend the whole podcast talking about how I came to this place, but that's that's sort of my introduction to it.
So we're going to talk today about that early stage of your career and some of the things that happened and that maybe you'd do differently if you had your time again, particularly focused on managing the pressure and the stress. And I think a lot of people listening and watching this will be in revenue contribution roles where they're working lots of hours, they're probably partying pretty hard, they want to get somewhere in their career, and they also want to have fun because of the stage of life that they're at, and getting that balance right is clearly important. And I think probably most people will be able to stand back and say, yeah, I'm not getting it 100% right. So I'd just be keen to just start with something pretty broad and just understand kind of what are some of the biggest challenges that you see with people? What are some of the biggest challenges that you faced, or maybe some of the biggest mistakes that you made? And we can maybe go from there.
The biggest mistakes I made was treating my body like it will always heal itself. I can always depend on it, and it will always be there for me. The example I gave was as a teenager, I was a crap skateboarder, and I used to take off, like if I had a good jumper, I would take it off because if I fell, my body would heal, but I would rip the jumper and that wouldn't get better. And I just kept that through. I didn't realize the impact the lifestyle could have on your body. And this is specifically for me. All my friends rode almost the same lifestyle and they got through and they're all in their mid-late 30s. Perfect. But for me specifically, it was the biggest mistake was treating my body that it was something that I could always depend upon. And at 23, 24, I think most people are in that headspace. And it was a lesson for me that, you know what, your actions have consequences. And you can play the game, but you've got to rest, you've got to recover, you've got to look out for yourself through this too.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. I guess, you know, your skateboarding analogy there is a good one, because I guess that's, you know, physical, but the same is true of mental as well, in that, you know, you got to rest your mind, you got to step back from the pressures of hitting a revenue number all the time, of wanting to get that next promotion, of needing to be seen to work hard, but then being present with your friends and family. And actually, there's only so many hours in the day, right? And I guess creating rest for your brain and your mind and your emotional being over not just your physical being is equally as important.
Yeah, completely. But again, I'm well aware of, I'm speaking as a 35-year-old at 23, even with the knowledge I have now, would I have listened? You know, probably not. And that has to be taken into context too. But if I were to do it again, I'd probably be a little bit more spread out in terms of rest, recovery, what I'm eating, how much or how little I'm drinking, just that lifestyle. And being honest, probably talking more. I try to take so much on myself. Felt that you're at that stage, construction was predominantly male. You didn't really talk about when you're struggling. You didn't really talk about when, you know, this might be a little bit over my head. That wasn't a conversation you had. You simply did more hours, or you stayed up later, or you tried to figure out a way to get it done.
Yeah. Well, when you think about organizations, so particularly in our world where you've got lots of SDRs who are the profile you're talking about, they're in their first, second, third job, they're in their 20s, they probably have a great time living life outside of work, earning reasonable money for the age that they are, so they've got a bit of disposable income. Sounds great, right? Sounds absolutely brilliant. But as a 23-year-old, 24-year-old, like you said, are you going to heed this advice? Are you going to be able to sit back and be mature enough to recognize the things that you need to do that might not pay off for 10 years? Probably not. And I just wonder around the organizations that employ people like that, what they should be doing or thinking about to try and encourage people to look after themselves. Is there a responsibility on the employer and the organization, in fact?
I think it runs both ways. Like I've never worked in a large organization, but I've heard interview questions of, what are you doing for me? And what would you do for me? And straight away, like, given my journey, my question was, what are you doing for yourself before we get into that? Like, you know, what are your practices? What are you doing? How are you looking out for your mental health? What are you doing at the minute versus let me see your benefit stack to weigh up if this is worth it. And that might possibly sound a bit harsh, but it can't be all one way and it can't be all the other way. If an employer is completely expecting their employee to look after all this themselves, that's not on either. I think it's if you come towards me, I'll come towards you. And then given the nature of what this is, everybody's different in it. Some people are going to have revenue targets. Some people are going to have lifestyle targets. Some people are going to have holiday targets. Some people are simply just going to want to, every hour that they have, make as much money as they possibly can and bank it. Some people are going to do that and buy a nice car. It's to me, there's no blanket fits all here, but it's understanding that it's a both, not an either or.
Yeah. I'd be really interested to get your narrative around, you talked a little while ago about communicating, so talking openly. And I think there's a real momentum around that as a topic, isn't there? Where, you know, particularly with young men, we're saying we've got to talk more. And I think we all acknowledge that it is a positive thing to talk, but of course there are still stigma, there are still, there's still emotions and fear and all sorts of things that come with that. I guess my question to you is, what would you do again when it came to that topic? So you're in a really male dominant environment in a time 10 years ago, whatever. Okay, we might not be in that time now, but there's still a lot of similarities. What would you be doing? Who would you be talking to? Where would you be looking? You know, what would be your first port of call when it came to communicating more around how you felt about things?
The first port of call would be, and this comes from working with a sales trainer, straight up what's expected of me, and having that understood completely before I go into this role. What has to happen in the next 6 months? Where do you think I am now, and where do you expect me to be in a year? And what, if you were in my shoes, what route would you take? At the time I was working for a startup. I'd moved to a startup construction company. I went from an organization that had downsized through the recession and then saw an opportunity to further my learning. But I didn't capitalize on how to further my learning. It wasn't specific. It was simply put in your hours and in 5 years' time, you'll be doing this and earning this.
Yeah.
Which was all I knew at the time. Stay in an organization long enough and you'll get promoted. When that's not how the world works.
No.
Like, what are you bringing? I also probably was a little more entitled than I should have been. I probably felt, I should be here. It's like, no. Like, one of the high, if you're worth more money, you'll be earning more money. I suppose it kind of grew up a little bit for me. When I view it now, removed from the situation. At the time I was in it, sort of swimming upstream. But it would be real clear metrics around learnings for me. How do I do that? What's the best courses to go on? Who are the best people in this company to speak to? Because some people are brilliant at their job, but they're not brilliant at passing that on.
Yeah.
Some people are, medium to average at their job, but they can educate you in a way far beyond. And it's getting around the people that can further you to where they are, and then finding someone else who's beyond that and keep taking those steps will be the one for me.
So let's go back to your 3 points that you said earlier. So you talked about breathwork, meditation, and gratitude. And this is specific to the 555 Club, but I think also, outside of that, they're all valid things for us to discuss. For the beginner that doesn't necessarily know what you mean when you say breathwork, give us a 101. What is it? How does it happen?
Actually, this conversation earlier, breathwork is simply a title for the first 5 minutes. To me, breathwork is absolutely anything that encompasses sit at your desk and be aware of your breathing. Just notice, how are you breathing? When you do that, you'll probably check in with your posture. You're simply bringing a bit of awareness into this moment. Normally, when you say to someone, check in their posture, the first thing they do is shoulders back, straighten up. They realize they've been sitting like a question mark. For the purpose of the 555 Club, the breathwork is cyclical breathing. So all that means it's in through the nose, out through the mouth, with no pause at the top, no pause at the bottom. I've had a godsend where Andrew Huberman, the Stanford, whatever he is, has just published a paper on how that's the most effective form for stress, which I don't fully believe, because you can have science and then you've got people in the real world in real offices doing real stuff. But breathwork encompasses that real simple stuff. Simply count your breathing 5 seconds in, 5 seconds out, or it can be wrapped in a blanket for an hour, breathing really intensely for an experience, be that emotional release, be that to let go of something you're holding on to, and everything in between.
And that's about relieving stress. So the outcome you're looking for there, and whether it's an outcome or a process or whatever, you probably have an opinion on. But in terms of what you get from that, and I am going to acknowledge that it might not be a one-off and it works every time, but what you're getting from that is a release of stress.
On the longer sessions, yes, and if more intense, shorter sessions, definitely. If you've ever done a more intense 30, 40 breaths and then hold your breath, that will change your state. For me, in the 555 Club, the 5 minutes of breath is designed to give you a space to get out of your head. If you breathe in a cyclical motion for 5 minutes, you're dropping out of that prefrontal cortex. You're dropping out of that, what the hell am I doing here? I've got 6 meetings this afternoon. I've got quarterly deadlines to hit. That will fade a little bit, and that's then why that bleeds into the meditation. It's more a gateway into the meditation rather than an active portion in and of itself.
So sometimes I like to, in these conversations, play the role of the skeptic. So I'll caveat this by what I'm going to talk about,
Oh,
not necessarily
lay
my
it on me.
opinion, but
Come
I
on.
like to. There's always people listening that want to challenge, and of course they're not here, so they can't do it. And I guess my question is, I'm walking around the office. I see somebody sat in their chair. I imagine them with their eyes closed. They're concentrating on their breathing, and I'm thinking, what on earth are they doing around the office? What on earth? Why aren't they working? They just sat there with their eyes closed. Now, you and I sat here now are probably looking at this reasonably holistically and saying that's a really positive thing for that person, that they're able to do that a couple of times a day, whatever it might be, and they're aware of themselves and they're present, and then they're able to move forward and be more productive as a result. But there'll be also people listening to this and watching this will go, what, you're going to spend 5 minutes concentrating on your breathing? What do you say to those people? Because they still exist, they're still out there. And of course, there is a workplace culture that would probably find that uncomfortable, I guess.
It's not that they exist. Like, if someone told, like, I'm basing this as someone who thought this was nonsense 10 years ago. Utter, not like, piss off. I'm not doing any of that. And that's where I'm coming from when I speak about this. I'm speaking to 10-year-old me at 25 who just told me to go and take a running jump. If you're skeptical about it, the first thing I'd ask is, what are you skeptical of? Is it because you can't see yourself doing that? Because that's a different question altogether. Yeah. Do you believe it doesn't work? Have you tried it? If that's the case, have you tried it consistently? And if it didn't work for you, then maybe you need something else.
Yeah.
Are you a science paper person who needs to see that? I'm not one of those people, but if you do, that can be provided. And then it was a post on LinkedIn talking about meditation, and rather than trying to explain the benefits, it's okay, show me the downsides to a staff member who is more present, more focused, a little less stressed, or at the very least can acknowledge how stressed they are. Like, if you can just give me the downsides to that, and then we'll further the conversation from there. Or someone who's taken a few minutes to go, you know what, today's been a mess, and here are the 6 wins I've had from it. Someone who does that at 7:45 at night. Actually, you know what? I had a good meeting with Owen. I had 3 decent conversations. Didn't close anything. I learned X, Y, Z. You know what? Not a total shit show.
Yeah, just a really good, interesting way of looking at it. You know, I'm going to probably tell this story really poorly, but there was a piece of research done. I'm going to guess circa 10 years ago. So probably when you were that guy that would have told you to take a running jump. And it was at a time where I was really stressed in my career. And I think at the age of about 25, I was managing a team of 40, 50 people, running a business, and probably well out of my depth in hindsight. But at the time, it was just where I was, and I was doing everything I could to get there. And I think you and I talked about this before, and how stressed and how full I was at the time. And I remember reading into stress and how to manage it and what to do. And there's a study that I stumbled across, and I'd have to go and look for it again. I can't remember. It was done at a US university, and the research suggested that when they looked at the relationship between stress and length of life, so average life expectancy, they looked at a group of people that had no stress or little stress in their lives. So they categorized their lives as reasonably lacking in stress because they didn't have jobs that were really stressful. They didn't have young kids, whatever, and they lived a chunk of their life and they'd not been under high pressure and stress. There were other people who had stressful careers and stressful lives, but who didn't think they managed it well. They didn't think they managed stress well, and it got on top of them. And others who had stressful lives but felt that they were able to acknowledge it and manage it well. So it was interesting because they were saying we've been stressed, and what they looked at was the life expectancy, and they found that the people with the lowest life expectancy were the people that had lots of stress but couldn't cope with it. The people with the middle one were the people who had no stress. The people with the longest life expectancy were those that dealt with stress but were able to manage it well, and had got the positives. So stress is obviously always shone in light. This is a negative, but actually
it's a really good thing. Like, intentional stress is incredible. That's why you lift weights in the gym.
Yeah.
You're not going in there to relax your muscles. You're going in to stress them, rip them apart. Yeah. And again, show me one study that shows that for longevity of life, we do really good with intentional stress. Really, really, really good. Where it's bad is that middle cohort where it's just chronically running under the surface and we don't even know it's there.
Yeah, really interesting. it's maybe a different way of just positioning stress, isn't it? And understanding that living with stress is good, it's normal.
Yeah,
But what will
absolutely.
define you is how you manage it, and the choices that you make in dealing with that level of stress.
Calling blanketing stress bad is the same as blanketing mental health bad. Like, mental health is just that it encompasses really, really good mental health and really, really bad mental health. How's your mental health? It's absolutely flying. It's terrible. But generally speaking, when mental health gets talked about, it's from that negative connotation. We need to examine mental health. Maybe 70% of the team are absolutely flying it. 80%, 90%. It's that we need stress as a species. We need it. It's how we grow. It's how we evolve. It's how you can cram an exam and get results.
Yeah, it brings the best. When you think about I was thinking about the Usain Bolts of the world going out to perform. It's the adrenaline and stress of that situation that gets the best out of them. Without that, they would be subpar. They would be subpar compared to what they're able to do. We talk about intentional gratitude. So you talk about gratitude, and I think anybody listening to this or watching this would be able to say something they're grateful for, whether that be a person or a thing in their lives or whatever. But you use gratitude, as a regular pattern, as something that's done intentionally and consciously. Talk to me about what that actually means and how that works.
I'll speak about what it means to me and how it works for me. It might be something completely different for somebody else. Again, first up, I'll say there will be days you'll do this and it will be almost a writing exercise. It's, it's not, it's just fucking doing gratitude. An exercise to do is, okay, so this is at the heavier end. It's think of 2 or 3 people that you're super great. Like, I'm grateful for my family. Like, okay, so as of 4 o'clock this evening, you will never get to see them again. Something happens. Like, now think about your family. And then come back to this moment where they're all there and you are going to see them. Now, how do you feel about your family? And then do that for anything in your life. Like, when I started this, there's days, like, I can't think of anything to be grateful for in a house with heating, with 2 dogs, with a wife, with a car that works, with internet, with a pen that I can write on. And that's just the very, very top level stuff. For me, I used this line with another gentleman. These tools aren't designed to let you escape from life. They're designed to help amplify everything else. Like, this is designed to, again, if you're coming into work, you're not going to come in grateful every morning. Monday morning, you're not going to be delighted at work. That's fine. But if there's an undercurrent of what you're doing, what you're moving towards, what you're becoming, what the job is giving you, what you're taking from it, which are 2 very different things, and what in the path you're moving on. If you can tap into that as you're picking up the phone, as you're reading your sales scripts, as you're reviewing your calls, and then compare it to where you were 18 months ago or 6 months ago or a year ago, because we always measure ourselves in the future. I should be here. It's like, no, that's bollocks. You shouldn't be anywhere. It's like, where have you come from? And if you can pull that in to reflect on it at work, do it in your personal life, do it with anything. And again, show me someone does that long term versus someone who doesn't, and compare how they are. That's what it brings for me.
Yeah, it's really, really interesting. When we look at meditation, so I'm trying to get through the 3 things here. Meditation, I think, going back to that perception, skeptical mindset, I think there's a bit of a misunderstanding around what meditation is to the average person on the street, and it's clearly become a more popular, more widespread thing in the last, I don't know, 5-10 years, and I hear of more and more people using it and doing it. For those people out there that haven't meditated before and that see it as, the old sitting with your legs crossed, we know it's not that. We know it's not that. But tell us what it is. Tell us how you use meditation and why it can be a really positive thing for someone's life.
Whenever you sit to, inverted commas, meditate, the first thing that's going to come up is your brain's going to go, can't do this. I've got 100 things to do. This is crap. It's not working. It's not working. I'm not, everything's going mental in my head. Okay, I'm just going to go back to work. The first mistake is that shouldn't happen. That's exactly what should happen. As soon as you sit down to be quiet, your brain's just going to go, here's 1,000 things you forgot about. Here's that thing you said 15 years ago to bar to that girl you liked. Oh, shit.
Yeah.
So that's normal. And then so the 555 club meditation is super basic. It comes around to focusing on the breath. The main reason for that is when you do that, you're going to notice the mind's going to start moving, start thinking. And maybe it'll be 5 seconds, maybe it'll be 10, maybe it'll be 15, but you'll notice that thought. Shit, I'm thinking, I should be focusing on my breath. As soon as you notice the thought, that's a realization that you're, in fact, not your thoughts. So that little negative voice that's chirping at you, that little thing that's telling you should be better, you can remove yourself from that and almost watch it. So you're not getting caught up in that voice in your head that should, would, could, have to be better. And then you can come back to the breath. The second part of that is that it also takes you back into this moment, which is the only moment you can do anything in. It's the only moment you can progress towards that target you're working for. It's the only moment you can rest your body. It's the only moment you can fully experience. And then combining those two and then it's why is not being your thoughts important? If you come back to the sales training around, don't confuse your identity and your role. Your identity will love the thoughts, or your role will love the thoughts. I am the salesperson. The salesperson is me. You have a terrible day at sales, therefore you are a terrible person. Not true. It's like you just had a terrible day at sales. And then whenever you can identify, you know what, that's just that thought trying to poke me in some way that it's going to, identify with me. It's like, no, it's not mine. It's just passing through. And it's like literally 2 minutes a day. That's what, like, from 8 to 10 minutes of the meditation, we drop into that part. But cumulatively over time, for me, it's 3 a.m. when every problem in the world's trying to get solved. It's like you're thinking, yeah, okay, I am thinking. Yeah, that's right. That's not me. I can't do anything about that right now. Drop back into the breath. That's where it helps me most.
Yeah, really useful. Thank you for that. So 555 Club, talk me through who you think can benefit or would benefit from that, and how do people get in touch, or how do people get started if they want to?
I'll tell you the people who have benefited rather than who I think could.
Yeah,
so
sure.
From regular members include members of the British military, salespeople. There's one sales organization come on twice a week, from single mothers and partners at a law firm, right down through associates, right down through. They're the people who are consistently using it. They're the people who I have testimonials from and reviews from. And the people and everyone uses it in their own way. If you want to drop on and give yourself 15 minutes a quarter to 8 at night to listen to some relaxing music, do that. If you want to come on and breathe intensely for 15 minutes, do that. Take what you need from it, leave what you don't. That's the idea of the calls. Best place for people to start, if you're curious, there's a free session on Instagram, 19 mornings out of 20 at 7 a.m. _Shaun 555, Shaun with a H, SHAUN. Other than that, if you want to get on the paid membership, it's 12 quid a month. Use the calls as often as you want, as infrequently as you want. There's no cap on membership. There's no sign-up limit. There's no sign-up commitment. And that, as I said to you about a month ago, it's embarrassingly simple. By design.
Yeah, love it. And that allows you to have a 20-minute sleep before you get on a podcast.
Exactly. and that's no accident either.
Yeah, I love it. Good stuff. Look, Shaun, thank you so much. Really interesting. I've been listening intently because there's some stuff in there that's fascinating. And I think, look, just a really healthy reminder for people that are aware of this and have practiced it before, because I think people slip in and out of these habits as well, but also introduction for people that maybe haven't heard of or used these concepts before. So yeah, really appreciate you coming on the show. Thank you so much.
Pleasure, Owen. Thank you.
Thanks.